The metallic sound of a notification cut through the silence of the empty locker room. Draymond Green looked at the phone in his hands, and something impossible happened. Tears began to stream down his face, while he held the device as if it were the most precious object in the world. You can tell that these weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of something much deeper. To understand how we got to this moment that broke hearts around the world, we need to go back exactly 48 hours in time. It was a typical Monday in the Bay Area. The morning air carried that cutting cold that only San Francisco knows, mixed with the familiar aroma of coffee that emanated from the Warriors' training center. Draymond arrived early, as he had always done for the past 15 years of his professional career. The echo of his footsteps in the empty hallway created a familiar symphony. Each step was a note in the music of a routine he knew by heart, but that lately weighed differently on his shoulders. Great victories happen when no one is watching, a phrase his father always repeated, and that now echoed in his mind with a meaning he didn't yet fully understand. How many times in life do we really stop to feel the weight of our own journey? The locker room was silent, but pulsed with the energy of thousands of memories. The walls seemed to whisper stories of conquered glories, of moments that defined not just games, but entire lives. Draymond opened his locker, and the metallic sound of the lock echoed through the empty space. Inside, beyond the usual equipment, was a small and worn photo. Him and Steph Curry celebrating their first championship together. In that image, two smiling young men had no idea they were planting seeds of a friendship that would become stronger than any victory on the court. It's impossible not to feel nostalgia when we look at where it all began, he murmured to himself, lightly touching the photo. The morning training went normally. Sweat, mixed with determination, the rhythmic sound of balls hitting the court created a hypnotic soundtrack. But something was different in the air. Draymond felt a tension he couldn't explain, as if the universe was preparing something special. Steph arrived a few minutes later, as always making jokes and spreading that contagious energy that made any environment lighter. The two exchanged casual greetings, but Steph noticed, because true friends always notice, an almost imperceptible shadow in Draymond's eyes. During practice, every movement was executed with surgical precision. Years of partnership had created a silent language between them. A look was enough to communicate a play. A simple gesture transmitted complex strategies. But a look was also enough to perceive when something wasn't completely right. Coach Kenneth Jones, a man of few words but much wisdom, ended the practice with his usual catchphrase. "Remember, guys, what we do here defines who we are out there." While the other players dispersed, Steph remained a little longer, organizing equipment unnecessarily. Something that most impresses about true friendships is how we can feel each other's internal storms, even when the sky seems completely clear. That's when everything started to change. That afternoon, during a routine press conference, a journalist asked a question that cut deeper than a sharp blade. "Draymond, some analysts are questioning whether you still have the same relevance on the team. How do you respond to these speculations about your future?" The question hung in the air like thick smoke. The silence that followed lasted only 3 seconds, but seemed like an eternity. Draymond took a deep breath, feeling the weight of decades of dedication being publicly questioned. "Next question," he replied simply, but his voice carried a tension that echoed far beyond that room. Naturally, this leads us to the moment when everything he had built began to be questioned. It wasn't just about basketball. It was about legacy, about purpose, about what really matters when the spotlights turn off. Great victories happen when no one is watching, and sometimes the biggest battles do too. The first chapter of our story ends here, but the storm that began in that interview was just starting to form. That same night, while the city of San Francisco prepared to sleep, Draymond remained awake in his apartment, staring at the ceiling as if the answers were written among the shadows. The echo of that question still reverberated in his mind. Do you still have the same relevance? How is it possible that a single sentence has the power to tear down years of built certainties? The question hung in the thick air of the room, mixing with the familiar aroma of cold coffee he had forgotten on the side table. On the other side of the city, Steph Curry also couldn't sleep. He knew Draymond long enough to know when that apparently indestructible fortress began to show cracks. Years of partnership had created a connection that transcended the four lines of the court. They could feel each other's emotional storms even from a distance. Steph picked up his phone, typed and deleted messages at least 5 times. What words to use when your friend is questioning his own worth? Some wounds are invisible, but bleed inside in a way that only close hearts can perceive. The next morning, both arrived at the training center carrying invisible weight on their shoulders. The air conditioning emitted that monotonous buzzing that had become the soundtrack of their professional lives. But today it sounded different, heavier, denser. "Hey, bro, everything okay?" Steph asked casually, but his eyes searched for signs in Draymond's facial expressions. "Everything's fine, man. Just another day of work," Draymond replied, trying to inject naturalness into his voice. But both knew that well-intentioned lies between true friends have a short life. During warm-up, something that touches deeply is observing how two people who know each other so well can communicate through silences. Each pass, each movement, each look carried unspoken subtexts. It was as if they were dancing an emotional choreography that only they knew the steps to. Robert Kim, the team's veteran physical trainer, observed everything with that silent wisdom of someone who had already seen generations of athletes go through the same internal challenges. "You guys know that it doesn't matter what they say out there, right?" he commented during a break, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Great victories happen when no one is watching, and that includes victories over our own doubts." The phrase echoed in the empty gym. This time, it carried a different weight, deeper. It wasn't just about basketball. It was about resisting when the world questions who you are. The training intensified, each play executed with millimetric precision. But beneath the impeccable technique ran an underground current of unprocessed emotions. Draymond played as if he were proving something to invisible ghosts in the empty stands. It was during an apparently simple play that everything changed perspective. Steph was executing a move they had practiced thousands of times. But instead of passing the ball as he always did, he stopped, looked directly into Draymond's eyes, and said something no one expected. "Do you know how many times you've saved me on the court? How many times your presence made me better than I could be alone?" The voice was loaded with raw, unpolished emotion. "Don't let outside voices define what I've seen in you for more than a decade." The gym fell into absolute silence. Even the buzzing of the air conditioning seemed to have stopped to listen to those words. Draymond felt something tighten in his chest. It wasn't pain. It was recognition. It's impossible not to feel the impact when someone who really knows us reflects back our own importance in a way we had forgotten. But life has cruel ways of testing our emotional resistance exactly when we begin to feel a little stronger. That afternoon, during another technical training, Draymond received a call that would change everything. It was Sarah Mitchell, his agent, with news he wasn't prepared to hear. "Draymond, we need to talk. There are very specific rumors circulating about possible changes in the team. I can't speak over the phone, but can you come to my office still today?" The call ended, but the echo of those words remained vibrating in the air like a bell that doesn't stop ringing. Great victories happen when no one is watching, but sometimes the biggest storms also form far from our eyes. Steph observed Draymond's expression gradually change from relief to worry, and instinctively knew that something much bigger was happening. Something that would test not only their friendship, but the very essence of who they were as people. In that moment, without knowing, Steph made a decision that would change everything. A decision that would lead to the message we saw at the beginning of our story. Sarah Mitchell's office was on the 23rd floor of a building that cut through San Francisco's sky like a silver blade. Draymond went up in the elevator, feeling each floor like additional weight on his shoulders. The metallic sound of the numbers changing on the panel echoed like a countdown to something he didn't want to face. "Sit down, Draymond," Sarah said, her voice carrying that professional seriousness he had learned to fear over the years. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the thick tension that hung in the air conditioning. You can perceive that moments like these define not just careers, but the essence of who we are when everything we've built is at stake. "The conversations are more serious than we imagined," she continued, flipping through papers that seemed to contain the destiny of an entire life. "There's a real possibility that you won't be renewed for next season. The administration is re-evaluating priorities." The words fell in the space between them like stones thrown into a silent lake, creating waves that spread in increasingly larger circles. Draymond felt the world decelerate around him, as if time had decided to pause so he could fully absorb the impact of that revelation. 15 years, he murmured, more to himself than to Sarah. 15 years dedicated to this franchise, to this city, to these people. What would you do if you discovered that your home of a lifetime might no longer be your home? This question echoed in his mind while he tried to process the magnitude of what he had just heard. 2 hours later, Draymond was back at the training center, but it was as if a ghost had taken his place. Each mechanical movement, each gesture automated by the repetition of thousands of practices. Steph noticed immediately, because that's what true friends do. They feel the storms before even the first drops of rain. "What happened?" Steph asked directly, dispensing with any preliminaries. His voice carried that urgency of someone who knows that something fundamental had changed. Draymond looked at his friend, and for a moment, all the defenses he had built throughout an entire career crumbled like sand castles touched by the tide. "They're thinking about not renewing me, Steph. After everything we built together." The silence that followed was dense enough to be cut. Steph felt as if someone had punched his stomach with enough force to remove all the air from his lungs. It wasn't just about Draymond. It was about the dissolution of something sacred they had built together. "That's impossible," Steph murmured, but his voice betrayed uncertainty. The world of professional sports is brutal in its relentless logic, and both knew that impossible was a word that rarely applied to business decisions. That night, Steph couldn't sleep. He walked through the house like a restless ghost, frequently stopping at the window that overlooked the bay. The city lights blinked like terrestrial stars, each one representing a life, a dream, a story being written. How is it possible that life puts us in situations where we have to choose between loyalty and logic, between heart and reason. It was at 3 in the morning that inspiration struck him like lightning cutting through the darkness. Steph picked up his phone and, for the first time in hours, knew exactly what he needed to do. It wouldn't be a common text message. It wouldn't be a protocol call. It would be something that came directly from the heart, without filters, without strategic calculations. He opened the voice message app and pressed the record button. "Dre," he began, and then stopped. How to synthesize 15 years of friendship, respect, and admiration into words that really mattered. How to translate into human language the impact that a person had on his life. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and began again. "Dre, it's 3 in the morning, and I can't stop thinking about the conversation we had today. I know you're going through a difficult time, questioning your value, your place, your future. But I need you to know something I might never have said clearly." Steph's voice was loaded with raw emotion, not polished by social or professional conventions. It was the voice of a friend speaking directly to another friend, without audience, without agenda, just pure truth, crystallized in words. "You're not just my teammate. You're the brother that life gave me. You're the person who made me believe that greatness isn't about statistics or recognition. It's about real impact on the lives of people around you. Great victories happen when no one is watching. And in that moment, in the solitude of dawn, Steph was about to achieve one of the greatest victories of his life. The victory of expressing genuine love to someone who really mattered. "I saw you grow, saw you fall, saw you get up stronger than before. I saw you protect me when I needed it, challenge me when I was complacent, support me when I doubted myself. This can't be measured in numbers or contracts." The message continued for a few more minutes, each word carefully chosen not by the mind, but by the heart. When Steph finally pressed the send button, he knew he had just done something that would change everything. On the other side of the city, Draymond's phone vibrated with a notification. It was too late for routine messages, too early for emergencies. He picked up the device with curiosity, saw Steph's name on the screen, and a strange sensation took hold of his chest. It was exactly the message that opened our story, the message that would make him cry tears of gratitude, recognition, and pure fraternal love. And we return to the moment where everything began. The locker room was empty, bathed in the soft light of late afternoon that filtered through the high windows. Draymond had just finished an individual training session, one of those solitary sessions where we talk to our own ghosts and try to find answers in the echo of our own steps. The metallic sound of the notification cut through the silence like a musical note waiting a long time to be played. Draymond looked at the phone, saw Steph's name on the screen, and something in his chest accelerated. Voice messages at 3 in the morning carry a different weight. They come from the place where we keep our deepest truths. He pressed play. "Dre?" Steph's voice echoed in the empty locker room, filling every corner with human warmth. "It's 3 in the morning, and I can't stop thinking about the conversation we had today. I know you're going through a difficult time, questioning your value, your place, your future. But I need you to know something I might never have said clearly." Draymond felt something tighten in his throat. It's impossible not to feel the impact when someone who really knows us decides to open their heart without filters, without calculations, just raw and honest truth. "You're not just my teammate. You're the brother that life gave me. You're the person who made me believe that greatness isn't about statistics or recognition. It's about real impact on the lives of people around you. The first tears began to form. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of recognition. Of that kind that spring, when our soul finally hears the words it was desperately needing to hear. I saw you grow, saw you fall, saw you get up stronger than before. I saw you protect me when I needed it, challenge me when I was complacent, support me when I doubted myself. This can't be measured in numbers or contracts. Draymond held the phone as if it were the most precious object in the world. Each word was like an anchor thrown into his internal storm, bringing him back to solid ground. How many times in life do we receive the gift of knowing exactly what we mean to someone who really matters? Remember when you said that great victories happen when no one is watching? Well, bro, you have been my biggest invisible victory for more than a decade. You made me a better man, a better player, a better friend. Steph's voice was choked now, loaded with that emotion we can only express in the safety of dawn, when the world sleeps and our hearts can speak without masks. It doesn't matter what happens with contracts. It doesn't matter what analysts or media say. It doesn't matter if you play here, somewhere else, or if you decide to do something else with your life. You will always be my brother, and brothers don't abandon brothers. The tears now flowed freely down Draymond's face. It was as if years of pressure, doubt, and internal questioning were being released through those saline drops that carried both relief and gratitude. I need you to know that your legacy isn't written in newspapers or statistics. Your legacy is written in the hearts of people who were lucky enough to really know you. And that legacy is eternal. The message continued for a few more minutes, but Draymond was no longer just listening. He was feeling each word infiltrate the deepest places of his soul, healing wounds he didn't even know he had. "Thank you, brother," he whispered to the empty locker room, his voice echoing like a prayer of gratitude. When the message ended, Draymond remained seated in silence for several minutes. You can perceive that moments like this transform us in ways we can't always explain. Something fundamental had changed inside him, not about his career, but about his own worth as a human being. He picked up the phone and, with fingers still trembling from emotion, typed a simple response. "You just saved my soul, brother. I love you." In that moment, in the empty locker room of a training center in San Francisco, Draymond Green understood something that would take the rest of his life to fully process. Sometimes, the greatest victories of our lives don't happen under spotlights or applause. They happen in the silence of empty locker rooms, in the warmth of true friendships, in the courage of people who choose to love when it's easier to stay silent. Great victories happen when no one is watching. And that day, both Steph and Draymond achieved one of the greatest possible victories. The victory of knowing that, no matter what life brought, they would never be alone. 3 months later, when the renewal rumors proved to be just unfounded speculation, and when Draymond signed a new contract that would keep him home for 3 more years, he kept that voice message like a treasure. Not because it changed the final outcome, but because it changed something much more important. It changed the way he saw himself. And sometimes, that's all we need to transform a storm into growth, a crisis into opportunity, a tear into gratitude. Because in the end, what really matters isn't the titles we win, but the people we choose to love and who choose to love us back, without conditions, without agenda, just because we are who we are. This is a story about basketball, but it's mainly a story about the transformative power of genuine fraternal love. And maybe that's the greatest victory of all, discovering that we were never alone.